Well, very good. I know we'll still have some folks coming onto the call, and so I'd like to get started in the interest of time. And thank you all for joining us today. We're very, very excited about our webinar with Jim McGowan, co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer of CultureWorks. And so the timing for Jim's presentation today couldn't be better, as we're all starting to think through what does it look like as people are coming back into the place of work. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim. We'll have about 30 minutes, Jim, of content, and then some Q&A at the end. And so if you have some questions, we'll have some time available to ask Jim or share your thoughts at the end of his presentation. So with that, Jim, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And just like Ben said, what a appropriate topic for where we're at in our situation, our moment in time, if you will. So, following this presentation, I'll PDF this PowerPoint and make it available to everybody so you can have it. And so, with that in mind, in the spirit of presenting PowerPoints, I will not read every word that is on the PowerPoint, to save you all a little bit of time and angst. I have been through PowerPoints where people read the entire thing, and it's a little mind-boggling. But again, thanks for taking your time. Here we are. I call it Schlump Day because it's shelter in place hump day. Kind of put it all together. I have tried to trademark that word, and it is not working. So I will continue being in HR, which what I will do. So. Overview slide. Again, this is here so that when you do get the PowerPoint, you can see what the agenda is. I'm not going to go through that, but I will talk about, the very, very first slide is going to be, where are we? And where are we? Where are we? Here we are, uncharted waters, I mean, it's interesting. We have all done elements of everything we're doing. We've all done, video calls and remote this and that and work from home or whatnot, but I don't think any of us have done this in the capacity that we have to this at this point and to this level, and especially without the clarity on when we're going to get to the next normal is what I like to call it. I don't necessarily like to call it the new normal. I call it the next normal because it's just another stage of our collective experience. So, but here we are. What we do know, we are somewhere. We're somewhere here, and we're going to collectively find a way to get through to the next, the other side. But to really kind of highlight where we are, I do have some statistics here, and let me qualify these statistics. As you all know, employment statistics are typically trail is actually from April 13th through April 15th. It's from Sherm Economics joint biweekly report. It's not anything I think that's going to surprise anyone, but just to kind of, highlight a snapshot. And we all know that it's, I hate to use the term worse, but it's worse now than it was as of the 13th and the 15th. But you can see, 32% of hourly workers have been furloughed or laid off. 85% of hospitality workers have been laid off, so restaurants and hotels. Maybe something that's good over here on the top right, 68% of employers are done with layoffs. That still means, a third of employers are not done with layoffs. So, just be mindful of that. Down here on the lower left, the expected furloughed salaried employees that those companies expect to bring back within 3 months, about half. This one, it was shocking to me in the middle. Expected furloughed salaried employees never expected to return, 40%, 41%. That's a bit of a shocking statistic. And then here we are, all of us on this Zoom. We're one of these 64% of working from home. So again, moment in time for us. We know that's going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm a big believer that we've got to know where we're at to get to go, get further down that path. And I have one more statistic that I won't go through all this, but it'll be in the PowerPoint for everyone to review. But just showing, from left to right, laid off or furloughed, whether it's hourly or salary, you can definitely see that the hourly employees are more impacted by the pandemic than the salaried. But that does not mean that the salaried are not facing some sort of furloughed, changed hours, decrease in pay, or deferred pay, or whatever the case may be. I'll let you look at that on your own when I send this out. So, there we are. What do we do? You know what? We keep trugging. We keep running down that path till we find the next phase of where we're at. And so, to get a little bit more specific about that is, again, where I look at, we're in 3 phases in the current and near term. And the 3 phases that I see, number 1 is where we are today. And it's what we all know. Most of us, or many of us, are in survival mode. I'm not going to go into too much detail about where we are specifically today, because you are all experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing. What's phase 2? And this seems to be right around the corner. There's obviously a lot of states talking about this and companies talking about it. We at CultureWorks are talking about it with our clients. It's that phase. It's where those initial efforts to put together that plan. And, it's a test, and we're going to be prototyping what those operations are going to look like. But that's like the next phase. We're right around the corner. And then, I say, and again, I call it the near-term phase for phase 3. That's after we've cleaned the offices and done everything we can do to return to work. But then we start to find a way to maximize whatever that next normal is. So trial and error. And then that will go on for a period of time before I feel like we'll then go to which will be a little bit more like we have today, but peppered in with all of the new realities that are going to stay with us as we continue to move forward. So those are the 3 phases. Again, I didn't put any dates on this because no one's telling us dates. But we do, again, I believe return to work is around the corner. In May, even in California, I'm confident we're going to start to see that for even some non-essential businesses. And then, my, pie in the sky guess is as soon as that first, oh my God, now we're back at work, this is what we're doing, that's when we're going to start to really try to find ways to maximize whatever that situation looks like. So I'm jumping right to phase 2 because we're in phase 1 right now, and we all kind of know what phase 1 is. I am going to really, really briefly talk about, the return to work process and recommendations. And I'm not going to go into a significant detail on that because number 1, we do have that. If you need it at CultureWorks, we have return to work checklists, and there's a lot of information out there. And truth be told, that could be a full-on presentation unto itself. So I'm just 3 high-level things. Number 1, first and foremost, like anything, create that action plan. Create and then implement that action plan. And it's got to really be at the top of that list is assessing the risk, controlling the risk, and mitigating the risk. So get that plan in place. And one thing that, that we're time again, highly recommended is that for all companies, you put together, a pandemic response team. And, the giant companies, they're going to probably have, 40, 50 people on those response teams with, representing different functional departments, levels and regions and this, that, and the other. But even the smallest organization, their pandemic response team could be 3 people, whatever. But you'll see why this is important, not only, right out of the gate at the obvious levels of, having, who you go to take action for specific issues that pop up related to the pandemic. But future planning, you'll see how it makes a lot of sense as well. And then, step 2 is you really physically prepare to reopen the workplace. You got to clean, you got to sanitized and potentially modify the workplace? You know, are you going to do social distancing, physical distancing in the office? Are you going to have, you're going to create one-way lanes so people, you know, only go around the office or the factory floor in clockwise positions? Are you going to, you know, tape off, you know, quadrants in the workplace? Are you going to close common areas, temporarily close, you know, lunch rooms or break rooms or whatever the case may be? So you've got to establish those workplace protocols. You know, for example, are you going to limit or temporarily prevent clients or vendors or visitors from coming on site? Whatever the case may be, are you going to require your employees to have their temperature taken when they come on place? So you need to establish what those workplace protocols, update your policies and procedures, and then consider modifying those schedules. All that needs to be done before you actually start pulling that team into place. And then the third step is, you know, actually getting that team and bringing it into the workplace. And there's really, you know, there's two types of team members to consider. Number one is the furloughed or the laid off employee. And for that individual, you actually need to consider the specific paperwork need to bring the employee back to work, because they are being re-employed. So if they're hourly, they need to, you know, fill out the notice to employee form. They need, you know, terms and conditions around what their wages and, you know, any modified sick time or whatever the case may be. So it is very much like a new hire process. So you got to consider that. And you also, of course, the other team to bring back to the office is the ones that just are working from home. And I'll talk a little bit about both those as well. But whatever that process is, or whatever team that is, you know, this is where you want to have a really well thought out and systematic order of return. Systematic order of return. So, you know, you don't want to just say, okay, on Monday, you know, all 100 of our employees are coming back. It's like, no, we're going to actually phase those employees in. We're going to bring, you know, if it's a recall, we're going to bring them back in order of seniority or of the essentialness to the organization, or, you know, we got to get our machine shop running before we get our assembly workers running, whatever that case may be, so that you can bring those and phase those employees in. And then a consideration is, you know, and I'm not a big fan of hypotheticals, but we're in a hypothetical space right now. And that's to really consider, what are you going to do for those employees that, number one, the employees that are working from home, they're unwilling or unable to return to work. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're dealing with, they're, you know, taking care of someone at home. How are you going to manage that? How are you going to, you know, either provide flexibility for them or potentially hold them accountable? And then on the flip side, if it's an employee that's been furloughed or laid off, you know, they may choose, or maybe they found some other work during this time period. And in that case, then you have the opportunity to drop them off the recall list and the next person lines up. But the you know, short version of a long story for all of this, it's planning. It's pre-planning, and before that, call any employee back, have that plan in place so you can consider have a decision tree about how you're going to handle the yes, no's of various situations for those employees that come in place. Just a quick sound check before I move on. Is everyone seeing everything? I'm going at the right pace. We're all good to go?
Yep.
Awesome.
That's fine.
Okay. There's only 1,600 slides left. We'll be here till Monday. So it's going to be great. So, you know, again, it's the phase 3, you know, I call it the next normal. You know, this is when we're going to start to maximize the situation. The first and foremost thing that I can't emphasize enough is we cannot forget what we're going through right now. And that is a pandemic that is all of us to have a business continuity plan in place. And so we need to be prepared to re-implement that plan in the event, you know, people start to return to work and there's a spike in the the authorities, shut us down again, so to speak. So, we can't just, look, and I'm at the front of the line that I want to just forget about this and wake up and act like it never happened. But in the spirit of survivability, let us not forget what we're going through right now. Let's revise that business continuity plan, and let's keep it at the top of mind so that we can be prepared to get ahead of it in the event we have a setback for any reason. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, now your team is back, and you've played with maybe, for example, half the team is in the mornings, half the teams is in the afternoon, so that you're maximizing, social distancing, or you've eliminated most travel for teleconferencing. So now we need to start grading and assessing all these revised and these transitional policies that we have implemented, and how are they impacting our clients? How are they impacting our sales, our operations, the team morale? Again, we need to. And it could be as simple as having your leadership team, getting on a whiteboard and writing down, okay, this is the old policy. Here were the results. Here's the new policy. Here's the results. Are they working? We're being a lot more efficient because everyone's working from home, but we're not effective because things are dropping through the cracks because they used to just look over the cubicle and get something sorted out. So how do we address what that issue is? So we grade those policies, we assess and we grade those policies, and then we can find a way to improve what they are. Through the lens of HR, there's a fair amount of processes that we can actually utilize what we're going through right now with remote and video processes. The recruiting effort, obviously before you actually start interviewing, whether it be a phone or in-person interview, all that's remote anyway. People are sending in their resumes or responding to a job ad, whatever the case may be. So recruiting is a natural fit to support a remote and a video type environment. Hiring can be very similar as well. He has hired people in a different state. That has many times is through video conference. And paperwork can all be performed electronically. All the big payroll companies will provide digital onboarding, and even performance management can potentially be performed through either from a remote perspective, video perspective, whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of HR processes. It's kind of ironic, the H stands for human, and it's one of the departments that really is conducive to a remote style environment. So staying on phase 3, how do we, again, maximize the situation? So this is where I think there's some really interesting things that we can work on. So the first and foremost thing is, how do we increase our success factors? And I can't one either enough, which is invest in training. And first and foremost is, I would argue 70% maybe of the individuals that are now doing video conferences had little or no video experience prior to this. They have, we all watch videos, but have they interacted on that video? So training those individuals on how to maximize the video conference experience. I was alluded to it before I got on this webinar on how I had shut my doors and put my pets away and did a variety of things to prepare the environment so that it's distraction free. But there are several things for consideration. I am a hand talker, and hand talking doesn't do very well in an environment. So teaching people that aren't familiar with it, with the video conference situation, and basically our recommendations is to go through and do just like you would, to address like a uncomfortable conversation with an employee for a video conference. We can do role playing. hey, I'm going to be the client, you be the salesperson, let's go through it, and then I'm going to help walk you through it. Hey, I didn't understand that, you spoke too quick, your background is a little distracting, whatever the case may be. So investing in that training can have a lasting and positive impact. The other area that's too is that video is awesome, but video is not the end all. And if you think about it, for the better part of 50 years, we were doing amazing work with just the telephone. And how many times have you been on conference call after conference call after conference call, or one-on-one calls, and have had successful and productive calls? Making the decision to choose between a voice call or a video call, understanding what a client or an employee's preference is, understanding when we might get video fatigue. I mean, who has done 7 Zooms in a day and you're like, oh my, I go again. I've got to do another Zoom. Can I just do a call, as the case may be? When you can, again, helping an employee on the team understand how to assess when a client or one of their colleagues does prefer a different platform, or at least a break from video, whatever that case may be. So training on video conferencing and video conferencing optimization is significant. In fact, if you want to start a business, that would probably be a pretty good start right now, because you could do it over video, in fact. So, and I would like to be credited with the idea if you happen to do that. Second thing, invest in your technology. Obviously, not only in the backbone infrastructure. Do you have the bandwidth, the routers in place, the security in place to support the video voice, as well as the personnel technology. Do people need headphones? Do they need better computers? Do they need separate cameras? I did a video call with someone yesterday. It's a great call, except his camera was over here. So he spent the entire call, he was looking at me, and I was him, but this is what I saw this, and we were friends, but I was like, dude, you can't do that, well, he did it, but it was weird. So FYI on that. The other technology investment to consider is, there are a variety of platforms out there. So again, it's not just voice video. My team, we use Microsoft Teams significantly. And so in addition to one-on-one instant messaging through Teams, we have group teams. So, if it's just the one-off, we're doing collaboration through Teams portal. We're doing a lot of employee recognition, which is kind of the next point as well. But it could be Teams, it could be Slack. There's like 20, probably even more than that, of those types of collaboration platforms where employees can use them to not only collaborate by sending documentation, but also shout outs or shootouts, as I like to write here, but I will address that before I send it. And then the other suggestion as we get into the next normal is to consider blended engagements. So it doesn't necessarily, again, this is under the assumption that we are in we've been approved by the authorities to have in-person meetings, or whatever the case may be. But it can be very effective where the leader of the sales team, so to speak, flies to New York for the important client visit, the video conference call, and the support team and the project manager for the rest of that team, they're still back at their home office, or they're back at the corporate office. So that blended approach can, you still have that in-person touch. You're still, you're able to read the client, the body language. The client understands how important they are that you have come out on site, but at the same time, you're not, from an efficiency standpoint, you've got the entire team involved in that. And that's another scenario where you would want to do some training. And in that training, I would call it cadence training, because when is the person, who's on site, how are they engaging, and how are they making sure that the team is engaging so people don't just forget that someone, how many times have you been in a meeting and there's 8 people in the meeting and 1 person on the call, and everyone forgets about the person on the call, and then they're talking fast, and they're talking over each other. Everyone in the room sees it, but the one individual doesn't. So we just got to be mindful of that. So as I get to the wrap up here, I just want to talk a little bit about how do we build culture, continue to build culture throughout, any one of these phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or, whatever that final blended next normal looks like. And we're all about values and communication. That is the critical element of this. Why is it important? It's important because if you have good culture, your employees will be invested, and that is critical for your success. And you have to, especially today, we have to have those employees collaborating. We have to have them be committed, and we have to have them being creative on solving problems. They're the lifeblood. And proprietor, your employees are your most value that you have. So that's why it's important. And culture really is when you bring your values alive. So, my recommendation to all companies right now through this crazy, unprecedented time, number 1, reveal your values. Do they still hold true? Ideally, they do. Ideally, the values that your company has codified are just as relevant today as they were before COVID-19. That's the sign of amazing self-awareness and an amazing company. But that's not to say that if there are some values you're like, wow, we really now understand the importance of, empathy that we didn't have previously. It's okay to refresh those values. Review them, refresh them if needed, and then commit to being a values-based organization. And what I mean by that is you've got your values, and consider those values in every decision that's being made. As you're creating a marketing message to relay it through social media, does it reflect the values of you as an organization? When you're putting together a succession plan, is it the values that you have codified for your company? So values are the building blocks of culture. And then the way to get through this collectively as teams is communication. It's unbelievably important right now that we are communicating what we're going to do before we do it, of any key decision. We explain why we're going to do it, and then we explain how we're going to do it. So that as the employees, they get the what, why, how, they actually they will buy into it, they'll support it, and they'll help make it happen. And you want to touch base before that key decision, during the key decision, and after the key decision. And then, of course, I can't overemphasize enough having team and one-on-one pulse meetings. Again, know your team, know what the best cadence, course correct as needed. And then the last culture building comment I'll make on is, empathy, support, and balance. And again, why is this important? Number 1, again, we've got this whole, we've for a lot of us, we've moved our teams to work from home, and things are popping up, or the performance is being affected, and there's always more to the story. And so helping solve a personal issue, or addressing or giving the employee room for that, oftentimes help a problem employee thrive. So, having that empathy, understanding what those external home-based factors are. Look, yeah, we all have a home, but is it a home that is set up for an office? Not everyone has a space for an office. Not everyone, sometimes people have a family that's big, and they're everywhere. And so whatever their physical situation is going to impact their work from home experience. So if you can empathize with that, you can help an employee be really successful in that. The other thing is that, we will ask our employees, is your home office set up, without necessarily giving them suggestions on how to do that. So let's provide them, consider a place with, good light for a video. Consider a place that away from traffic from behind you, from distractions. Whatever those recommendations are. Again, not everyone has been accustomed to what the home office setup might be. Of course, consider flexible hours. And then for the last piece of this puzzle, for me, it's one thing that's critically important. It's about balance. We've got work, but we're now missing our water cooler talk, our coffee meetings, this, that, and the other. So set up some virtual happy hours, virtual coffee meetings. You could do karaoke. You could do fitness breaks. Something so that engagement, like the engagement in the offices, our office engagements are not 100% business oriented. There is what'd you do this weekend? Oh my God, did you see that show last night? Did you go to that concert? Find a way to keep that sort of culture building experience going from a virtual situation. If you've got a team that's being staggered, some back at the office, some out of the office. So, as a wrap up, as many of you know, who we are, CultureWorks. We are culture operations specialists. We have a team with over 100 years of collective industry experience.